Hey everybody, it's the weekend. You know what that means, right? No spoilers. Not a whole lot of spoilers for the new sets whenever the weekend rolls around, but we did get 7 cards to talk about, which is exactly enough for me to produce a YouTube video. But hey, even though we didn't get a whole lot of cards over the weekend, there's a chicken. Also, a lot of these cards were at least like worth looking at, right? We got some good looking stuff over the weekend. And since this would otherwise be kind of a short video, I'm also going to fill the runtime out towards the end with my top 5 favorite cards from the set so far. So actually ended up with a lot to talk about over the weekend. Let's go ahead and get to it. Well, the first card I want to look at today is Watchful Blister Zoa. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 blue for a 4/4 Phyrexian jellyfish. Dig those creature types. It's got flying and enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. Now when it dies, you draw cards equal to the number of oil counters on it. Now, this is probably the 14th time I've tried to do this take talking about this card because I have a surprising amount of things to say about it. I mean, a 6 mana 4/4 flyer is not a big deal. We've seen a bunch of these over time. They're usually not too special, but what they can do is win games of sealed, which is where I'm interested in this card. If you're going to do your pre-release, I wouldn't mind opening a copy of this. You know, I play a lot of 6-drops in sealed. It's a habit I can't break, but tends to be a pretty winning strategy some of the times, especially when you've got 6-drops like this. I mean, your opponent is prioritized to kill a 4/4 flyer before it kills them in sealed most of the time, but if they do, it's going to pay you back at least 1 card, unless they can somehow pull the oil counter off of it. But if you can put more oil counters on it, then suddenly it's going to pay you back 2-3 cards when they kill it. So that's a solid little guy, it turns out. Now, the tension here, I guess, the push-pull, is that if it does have like 3 oil counters on it, you probably should have killed your opponent by then. It's very likely if it has 3-4 oil counters on it, you're in some kind of stalemate and it's actually not that big of a threat in the air. But still, if it does end up with that many oil counters on it somehow through proliferate tricks or other methods, we'll see another thing you can do to put oil counters on stuff a little bit later in the video. But if it does end up with a bunch of oil counters on it, then suddenly your opponent kind of doesn't want to kill it, but they should, because it's going to kill them if they don't. But even if you're in a stalemate where this can't get through too much, it still sits on the board and is kind of imposing, because if your opponent does draw the removal, they're incentivized to take it out so they can attack you or not die to it. But if they do kill it, then suddenly you get paid off pretty handsomely. So I do kind of like this card. I just don't think it goes anywhere outside of sealed, so we should probably stop talking about it. Well, let's keep going to Atraxa's Skidder Fang here. This is 3 mana for an artifact creature. It's a Phyrexian insect, and it's a 2/2 that enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may remove an oil counter from Skidder Fang. When you do, target creature you control gains your choice of flying, vigilance, death touch, or lifelink until end of turn. First of all, just want to praise the art on this. I really like it. But aside from that, just a sweet little limited card too here. I mean, you don't usually want to pay 3 mana for a 2/2. Even in sealed, it's not usually the best deal. A lot of people are getting at least 3 power or toughness out of their 3-drops in that environment too. But this one gives you a lot of cool payoff, man. It doesn't give counters to things. It only gives things an ability till end of turn, but these are really punchy abilities, right? Death Touch works really well with Toxic. Flying, too, works really well with Toxic. Also, I say this with pretty much every oil counter card, but if you can proliferate more things onto it, seems pretty good as the combat steps move on. I mean, it seems like it's probably really good on like turn 5 or 6. You know? So the later in the game you play this, or the longer you can keep it around, the better. And note that it says you may remove an oil counter. So if you're wanting to save those oil counters for more important combat steps, you can do that too. Just a neat little card. But let's move on to Magmatic Sprinter. This is a fun card to think about. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 3/2 Phyrexian warrior with haste. And when it ETBs, you put 2 oil counters on target artifact or creature you control. At the beginning of your end step, return Magmatic Sprinter to its owner's hand unless you remove 2 oil counters from it. So this reminds me of the old Viashino guys from back in the day that would come down with haste and then pop back to your hand, which can sometimes be a sweet thing against sorcery speed removal, usually sorcery speed wrath effects and stuff like that. It can be nice to pop the suit back to your hand basically every turn, but of course, he's really mana intensive if you do that. The cool thing about this is that there are tricks, but those tricks are mana intensive too. You have to remember that. People keep saying, oh, it's only 3 mana for this. Well, actually, it could be 6 mana or 9 mana or 12 mana, depending on how many times you want to play the thing. So there is that. But I do still think that this is a neat card that I don't think is destined for too much standard play, but it all depends on what you can do with these oil counters and how low your curve is, that kind of stuff. I do like the idea of throwing like Erebus Forge down on turn 3. And then on turn 4, you play this and you still got mana for something else or whatever if you played a land. But on turn 4, you throw this down, and it can swing with haste, regardless of whether or not it gets oil counters. It can swing with haste, and you put its 2 oil counters on Eurobrass Forge, and then suddenly you can swing for 7 damage that turn. Seems okay. And like Eurobrass Forge is already on 4, it'll be on 5 next turn. So it's kind of a way to catch it up in terms of power and toughness. That doesn't seem bad. And there's a bunch of other like oil countery stuff you might want to be playing around with this card. It mostly looks like a pretty solid little uncommon for like oil counter decks and limited, which look to mostly be red. But still, I think this card looks pretty sweet to at least experiment with in standard. And I do think things like Reckless Stormseeker and a couple of other cards even are just going to be better 3-drops in most mono red decks, especially considering most mono red decks won't be too oil centric or anything. But I do think that if you can put a couple of oil tricks in your mono red deck, again, your Brass Forge and stuff, then suddenly this doesn't look so terrible because if at its floor, it's a 3-mana 3/2 haste, if literally nothing else, with an ETB trigger. So these things might be just enough to see some sparing standard play, especially after we lose some of the pieces that are currently in the mono red deck. But despite the name of the card, I don't think it's going to be making a mad dash to standard playability. It's just a cool little thing that I think is going to have a lot of tricks in limited for the time being. But we'll move on to Wizard's attempt at a comedic name. This is Chittering Skitterling right here. This is kind of fun to say. Chittering Skitterling is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 1/4 Phyrexian rat with corrupted and very disturbing art in a way. I hate eyeball stuff. Anyway, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw a card, but you can only do this if an opponent has 3 poison counters or more. Ah yes, the next in a long line of black 3 mana 1/4s that can sack things to draw a card. Skullport Merchant, which was the granddaddy just a couple of years ago. Right now we have like, what is it, Glittering Barricade in standard, but that doesn't see any play because it's not great now as far as this card goes. I don't hate this. I do hate that it's basically just a vanilla 1/4 for 3 mana until you can put 3 poison counters on your opponent. But in the poison deck, it might be kind of nice to have a Skullport Merchant. That said, that deck looks pretty aggressive, So, I mean, toxic decks have to be aggressive. I don't know how much time they can take off to play a 3 mana 1/4 that gets killed by cut down or whatever. So I'm not actually too sure about this dude, but I do like that it doesn't cost you any mana at all to draw cards. You can only do it once a turn, but whatever. I don't have to sit 2 mana to the side like I did with Merchant, which I think is really sweet. Let's move along to maybe my actual favorite card of the day. Here's Scheming Aspirin. You know I love stuff like this. It's 2 mana, 1 and a black for a 1/3 Phyrexian Advisor, and whenever you proliferate, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Oh, so what, you mean there's no once per turn restriction on this? Is fun actually allowed on this magic card? It would appear so. Now, I didn't even look at all the different things that proliferate in Modern and Commander and stuff. I'm sure there's plenty of fun stuff you can do. All I did was go to Scryfall, Future Standard, Proliferate. Show me what's going to be in the format when this card is legal, And note that we don't even know what all is going to have Proliferate because we haven't seen the full set, but we did get some pretty cool hits. There's Blight Belly Rat, which is in the same color at the very least, and when it dies, drain 4. That seems good in your little like aristocrats like sacrifice deck, But some really good ones are like Cacophony Scamp, just a 1-drop red creature. That means you can play it on turn 1, this guy on turn 2, attack with the Scamp on turn 2. If you get through, you can Proliferate. That deals 2 extra damage to your opponent, and when it dies, it deals another damage. So it's like 22 to 16 before your opponents even drop their second land in a lot of games. And that seems like a pretty good line. There's also Expand the Sphere. You can just choose not to find the lands even if they're there, and then Proliferate twice. That is 4 damage to your opponent and 4 life your way. So that seems okay, at least, right? There's the new Staff of Completion. That just costs you life to proliferate. So really, it only costs you the loss of 1 net life to proliferate, which is pretty sweet. And then, of course, there's Volt Charge, so you can do like a total of 5 damage to your opponent's head with that combination. That seems good. There's the new Anticipate or whatever it is that also proliferates, and that seems like a cool little combo with this card. So just based on what few things we know of that are going to have Proliferate, I already see some interesting combinations with this. If you have 2 out, then it just becomes unbelievable. So I like this thing an awful lot. I'm pretty sure it's not actually good enough for standard playability, but we are going to try it more so than any other card almost in the set. We are going to try with this one. Now, we also got to see a couple of rares over the weekend, but just a couple. That said, these look somewhat impactful, so let's take a look at Zenith Chronicler first. This is 2 mana for an artifact creature. It's a Phyrexian construct, and it's a 3/1. Not terrible stats for a 2-power artifact creature. Whenever a player casts their first multicolored spell each turn, each other player draws a card. So, in monocolored commander decks, this is your 2-drop. Basically, almost guaranteed for in every monocolored commander deck. This is go. So in just about every monocolored commander deck and artifact commander decks, here's a 2-drop for you. This is a pretty good looking card, man. Like, I don't know about in standard. Maybe. Do note that if you cast multicolored spells, your opponents draw cards. So don't do that. But, even in standard, if you are playing against, I don't know, Esper, something like that, the card could pay you off pretty easily when they go to play Rafine on the next turn. So there's that. But if you're playing against mono red, which there's like a 15% chance you are, or mono black, which there's a 15% or so chance that you're doing that, then suddenly card gets worse. But in best of 3, de facto best deck is Grixis right now. So if they go to play Blood Tithe Harvester or Corpse Appraiser or something, then suddenly draw yourself a card that seems pretty good, especially, again, considering the stats aren't, like, embarrassing on the dude in the first place. Really, in some ways, like, one of the better looking cards we've seen in the entire set, and being like 100% serious. I took my hand out of my pocket because somebody told me in the comment section, don't put your hands in your pockets. I don't know why. I don't know why that would be like a thing. I know that you're well-intentioned. I love you and I appreciate you. But I put that's just what I normally do, because that's me being casual. I don't know why I can't have my hands in my pockets. It's been bugging me ever since I read it. I love you. I guess it's because I could be doing something else with this hand. I could be being entertaining with this hand. Hey, everybody, did you know we got one more card left today to look at? And it's the other rare from this weekend. And this one, I feel like I've said this a couple of times in this video, but this one is almost certainly the commander playable card from the weekend, and I mean it. This one right here, baby, is the Mycosynth Garden. This is a land. It's a sphere. It's not legendary, by the way, and it taps for a colorless mana. You can also pay 1 and tap it to add a mana of any color. It's very generous of them. Or you can do what the card actually does, which is to pay X and tap it and have it become a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. So, holy crap, the first thing I want to point out about this is that it does not say until end of turn anywhere on it. It just becomes a copy of that artifact. It also does not say that it retains these abilities or anything like that. So, pretty sure after you make it into an artifact, it is stuck as that artifact for the rest of the game. So, don't think you can turn it into another artifact or anything like that. But still kind of important. I've already seen Commander players meme about this one. I play this on turn 1 along with a Mana Crypt, and then for 0 mana, I turn it into a Mana Crypt, and now I can tap for 4 on turn 1. Hey, that seems good. You could do that. You can also copy Soul Ring with it. Also, it just says non-token artifact. It doesn't say non-creature artifact. So you can turn this into a, I don't know, Cityscape Leveler or something. And look at that. It's been in play. It can attack. Actually, it can't attack unless you can untap it that turn, because it taps to use its ability. But still, it doesn't matter. You can turn it into an artifact creature and start swinging with it on the next turn. As a matter of fact, you can turn it into an artifact creature at the end of your opponent's turn, because you can do this ability anytime you want to. Also a little stupid, now that I'm really digesting that. I can turn it into a Phyrexian Flesh Gorger. Doesn't that seem fun? Doesn't that seem like the funnest thing? It's so fun, but it really doesn't end there. There's a bunch of stuff that I assume you could be doing with this in standard. I'm going to turn it into an Urabrass Forge. I just really like that card. But anyway, it's easily the best card of the weekend and easily the most impactful for that matter. Even though obviously the card hasn't seen any play yet. That would be a weird form of witchcraft. But still, I think that this one is pretty safe to say, even though there's a guy that draws cards whenever you cast multicolored spells, whenever they do. But even with that guy lurking around, I'm still pretty sure this is like the most potentially broken card almost of the whole set. It's the second time I've said that too, but this is a pretty silly card. It's a silly card to exist. But anyway, now we got to talk about my favorite cards from the set so far, and I'm going to try to make this not a sneak peek of the top 10 or the sleepers video or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of these showed up in the sleepers video, because I'm not going to talk about like the most powerful cards in the set or anything like that. I'm just really going to talk about the cards that I like the most and that I can't wait to play with. But even then, I'm going to try to make this like relatively quick so that I don't spoil a bunch of jokes and stuff, things I want to say about them in the top 50 of the sleepers video. I'm just kind of going to go through these relatively quickly to give you an idea of what cards you're probably going to see on the stream in the next couple of months. So the first thing, and probably the only actually for real powerful card in the entire list, is Atraxa. I just really want to reanimate this thing. I think they made a mistake on this card. I think it's supposed to say if you cast it. but it doesn't say that. So you can just reanimate it or blink it even. Every time you blink it, it does this. It's just so stupid. That was a bad call from them, so I can't wait to exploit that. But I also want to play, this is where the goofy cards start. I want to play Black Sun's Twilight, like really, really bad. This looks like a sweet little removal piece that will probably kill their Shieldred and also give you your Shieldred back from your graveyard. So I like that a good bit. I wonder if that's how it's going to be played 90% of the time. That's actually really boring. Probably the goofiest card on this whole list is Blade of Shared Souls, but I have a pretty good idea that this is going to be in like every blue commander deck in like a year or two. I just assume this is going to be a really popular card in EDH, but even outside of that format, I don't think this card's bad, man. Like I think that we're all looking at a 3-mana clone that technically like never dies and we're all just going, yeah, meh, who cares? Actually, I think this is a sweet card that could have just been an equipment that makes you pay the extra 2 mana to create a copy of a thing or whatever. But no, it actually gives you a 2/2 the turn that you play it that can go ahead and copy whatever. And I think that's actually really, really sweet. 3 mana for a never-ending clone. Like, let's kind of go a little bit. Why aren't we talking about this card? Also really like Urabrask's Forge, but I think I've made that pretty clear over the course of this video. I'm always thinking about this card. This is, again, I'm trying to not to make this a preview of the Sleepers video, but there's some things that just cannot be avoided, so I won't say too much about it here. All I'm going to say is that the card seems more than fine to me, and there's like almost no one actually talking about it. I don't know why. I don't get it. But anyway, the last card I want to talk about here is Argentum Masticore. I know, I just talked about this card yesterday. And if you're a patron at the $1 level, you get to see me talk more about this card. I put like an extra minute and a half of me talking about this card on Patreon, because I feel like I never give the patrons enough during spoiler season. I don't want to leave them out in the cold. So if you want extra content with me talking about this, check out the Patreon link in the description. But really, the whole reason I'm talking about this isn't to sell the extra content on Patreon. It's because like I genuinely think that this card is horribly, terribly overlooked, and nobody understands that it's actually incredible. But I guess that's all I got for this one. Hope you enjoyed the spoiler content this video, and I hope you enjoyed the top 5 things I want to play with, mostly is what that is. Just let me know in the comments section how you're feeling about the set so far, right? I mean, we're a pretty good ways into it, but we're nowhere near done or anything. So we still got a little bit of set to go, but as far as the mechanics and how things are shaping up, I think it's a good time to kind of check in with an opinion on how you feel about the set. What are your favorite cards? What do you want to play with? What do you think is strong? All that. So hit me up in the comment sections with all those opinions. And of course, remember that if you see someone with my avatar or whatever profile picture down there offering you some kind of giveaway, it's not me. It's someone impersonating me to attempt to scam you. So make sure you report them as quickly as possible. I think they're mostly gone over the last couple of videos because we scared them off. But in case you see them down there, if you cite them, then make sure you report them. But aside from that, just like the video, if that's not too much to ask. Subscribe. I know that is too much to ask, but maybe just this one time. If you subscribe for more spoiler content, deck text, I spent $5 on whatever. We just put out the I spent $5 on Dominaria Remastered video. It's a pretty good one. Go check it out. But anyway, I'm actually just going to leave you alone for now. I think I've taken enough of your time. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.